stories, songs and tales from the past. The laughter, the tears, the pain, the joy. And there was the music, which reflected the spirit and soul of the times. The Merry Blackbirds was one of the most successful big bands of the 30s. Its founder, impresario Peter Rizant, recalls those early days.
I started in ragtime as a youngster, before I even went to college. And my mother thought, well, I would become a Tsotsi, which was the language for ragtime at the time. I thought about giving the band a name. We suggested all members think of names and they write them down, and at the next rehearsal we will discuss, we'll choose a name. And we did. And we subsequently came to the name that I had chosen. I said the Merry Blackbirds. I said it would be nice not to use names of famous bands and things like that. We have our own name. And it seemed they agreed that it was a good name. So there you are, the Merry Blackbirds were established. Our mainstay financially were from white shows. I remember when the ice rink was opened at Wembley, we went to play there, and the management there so impressed and wanted to give us a contract to play there. But the police came and said, this must be their last time they appear here, because this is a white place. And if they want to play, they must go and play for their own people. He says, but can't I get a license? He said, no, there's no license. Blacks are not allowed to play to whites at exclusive white places. Dolly Rathebe came in just during those years, in the late 40s into the 50s. And she did very well. She did well. Everybody liked him. We all liked her very much for her deep voice.
In 1952, Dolly Rathebe was the reigning queen of blues and a popular movie star. Photographer Jürgen Schadeberg was asked by Drum magazine to make some glamorous cover pictures of Dolly against a beach setting. Since Johannesburg is far from the sea, Jürgen decided to use a sandy mine dump for a beach effect. They suddenly found themselves surrounded by hordes of breathless and excited policemen who somehow suspected them of contravening the Immorality Act. They were pushed around while the boys in blue searched for clues of what they termed indecent behavior. The baffled suspects were then hauled off to the police station, where it took a string of phone calls and hours of waiting before they were eventually released, with a stern warning.
We also had a silly piece of legislation on our books, at least we call it the period of prohibition. So we patronized shebeens, and we were often arrested for drinking out of season. One amusing incident was in old Sophia town, when we had sent Doc Bikicha for a bottle of brandy at a shebeen in Sophia town. After a couple of hours, a youngster came along. He says, Braken, that guy I always see with you is lying at the corner of Victoria and Tucker Street. So we rushed up there. We found Doc sprawled. When we inquired, we realized that Doc had been arrested after buying the bottle of brandy. So what used to happen during those days, that is, you would be handcuffed together in twos, and then they'd the liquor squad would march with you from Shibin to Shibin and making further arrests, and everybody who's arrested has to carry his own exhibit. If you are arrested with a tin of some concoction, you carry that. So what Doc did, he was at the end of a queue as they were marching through the streets of Passat, and he kept on taking a swig until the bottle was empty and he passed out. So the cops had to untie him and kick him around because at least they had no exhibit at least to produce in court.
You know, in those days, it was quite perilous just living your daily life, particularly if you were a journalist, because your job took you into places where most of the orthodox people wouldn't ever go, and particularly if you were an arts journalist. I went to a performance of African jazz and variety produced by Alfed Herbert, and I became friendly with the black stars of that, including a wonderful singer by the name of Dorothy Masuka, and a black singer who did a Louis Armstrong impression and was known universally as Satchmo. And Satchmo and I became bosom buddies, and he always brought Dorothy along. She was a very pleasant and charming lady. And we had this party in my flat, and everybody was dancing, and Duke was playing the piano and singing, and Dorothy sang a few times. And during the course of the evening, I went and asked Dorothy if she would dance with me, which she did, and we had a very pleasant dance. I took her back, and my Afrikaans girlfriend wouldn't speak to me for 2 days afterwards.
So Bloemfontein, there we come. We have an Indian in the cast. So Alfred thinks to himself, Lord, they don't allow Indians in the Orange Free State. What are we going to do with Shana? So he decides he's going to call him Sonny Harrison. You know, and Sonny Harrison's hair was too straight for a colored. So we get off the train. The policeman is walking towards us because he's seeing a bunch of crazy-looking blacks. What's all this business, you know? But Sonny, you could see his Indianism a mile away, you know. So he comes up, he says, "And know what van die ene? Ja, jong? En jy, wat maak jy tussen die mense?" Then Herbert walked towards these two. He says, "You have a problem?" And this man says, "Yeah, what's this Indian, this coolie boy doing amongst these people? Is he getting off this train?" Then Herbert says, "Where is the coolie boy?" And the policeman says, "What do you mean, where's the coolie boy? You can see him here." He says, No. This guy is not Indian." The guy says, "No. This guy is Indian, I don't care. You can ask." And Alfred says, "To your eyes, yes, he looks Indian. I agree with you, his mother is Indian, but he is not an Indian." In the evening, at the show, Shana was there, belting it out, you know, because the guy used to sing. After the show, some more policemen came up to Alfred and said, "Well, what about this Indian, this coolie boy?" Herbert says, What coolie boy are you guys talking about?" And you know, we had to avoid looking at Herbert because we were all going to bust out laughing.
Of course, we had young ladies like Dorothy Masuka. When she came from Rhodesia, in fact, she started with the Manhattan Brothers.
One of the most talented close harmony singing groups which emerged in the 30s was the Manhattan Brothers. Joe Mahotsi, on his first return trip to South Africa after 35 years of exile in London, reminisces about his early musical memories when his father used to sing a traditional melody.
Do, do, ti, do, do, ti, do, re, mi, fa, re, do, ti, mi, re, mi, do, so, mi, fa, sol, la, re, do. So we did a bit of tonic solfa also in this school, and that is how we managed to decide which voice has to sing where and so forth. On holidays, we used to go into Johannesburg itself, sing in the streets, Spanish from heaven, you know, because we were also exposed to some of the records from the state side, and these songs we used to sing in town and over holidays. And time and again, the police used to come and arrest us and put us in jail for a couple of hours. And at times we never used to even to get our monies back. They used to confiscate the whole lot. The very first concert we had, it was at the Pineville Ballandine Hall. Yes, and it was advertised by our friends. Our teachers encouraged us, and the place was packed. And those years, I remember the entrance fee was about 6 pence or 3 pence, something like that. When we went down to the Lesotho, we found that what we were being deprived of liquor-wise was being allowed to us for the first time without no problems at all. We bought some provision, you know, we bought some liquor to take with us. But when we went onto the border, we were not allowed to take it in. And so we were told, look, you take the stuff if you want it. You better take it in your stomachs. So we were given a place where we settled down in Lesotho and started drinking and drinking and drinking all these liters of liquor, you know, gin, you know, brandy, you know. And in fact, the whole thing got out of hand because the chap started getting drunk, and you know, somebody said something, and a fight started, and you know, Miriam Makeba was there, and she was crying out, "Oh, my brothers, what are you doing now? I mean, you know, you've been given this privilege, now you are misusing this." And we were at the border. We were given a policeman to monitor the whole operation. And so we had a 7-piece band, which was led by Makei Devashe. And then later on, we recruited Jonas Kwangwa and Hugh Masekela into the group.
I think that must have been early in the 50s. Father Huddleston got the trumpet for Hugh Masekela. It's quite a famous story. And then other African musicians wanted instruments, and some money was sent from London. Anyway, they then needed a place to rehearse. Ian Bernhardt was one of the main people who organized the Union of African Artists, and they met in the Bantu Men's Social Center down at the bottom of Eloff Street. And Ian has described how opposite the Bantu Men's Social Center was a building with a chicken farm, a battery farm. And they went to the owner, who gave them permission to rehearse there. And then one day the owner of this chicken farm came to Ian and said, "Oh, it's hopeless, I just can't have your people here." And so Ian said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "All my chickens are dying." And Ian said, "But why?" And he said, "Every time Hugh hits a high note, a chicken dies." So they then found opposite the chicken farm a building with a woman with a clothing factory, and she was in quite a poor way, so she was only too delighted to rent it to them, and that is what Dorkay House became.
Well, in 1952 in Sophia Town, we were driving back home late from a gig, and none of us had night passes.
The nightclub?
Yeah, let's go to the 39 steps, man. Yeah.
Hey, man, can't you go a little faster? I'm thirsty.
Me too, man. Me too, man.
Me too.
Everybody's thirsty.
And all blacks had to carry night passes by law after 10 p.m. Very strict, you see.
What you boys up to, eh? Where's your night pass?
We don't have night passes.
Get out of the car, now. Move it. Get out.
What's this, eh? Stolen goods.
The guitar.
Come on, open up, show me. Come on. Just like I thought, stolen goods. Come on, arrest these thieves. Come on, move it, move it.
And so we all came to Marshall Square. We were so tired and so frightened.
Look at our tuxedos.
Listen,
Thieves don't wear.
if you don't shut up right now, I'm going to dumber the whole lot of you, understand?
No bus, no bus. Sergeant, what thief is going on here?
No night passes, sir. All these stolen goods.
These are our instruments. We are musicians.
Musicians.
They look like a bloody lot of thieves to me.
Can you play Don't Fence Me In?
No problem there, no problem. Come on, guys.
Can I have my horn, boss?
Give me land, lots of land, under steady skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride to the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Oh, give me land, lots of land, and the steady skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride to the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Oh, set me loose, let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western sky. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see that mountain rise. Mountain rise, I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences. Gaze at the moon till I lose my senses. I can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Oh, cut me loose, let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western sky. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see that mountain rise. Mountain rise.
We knew a lot of American artists and jazz ones, jazz musicians and singers, the Ella Fitzgeralds and, Lena Hornes and so on. And our whole criteria was American. And suddenly this enormous, fantastic set of people landed up in London, and they were Africans. Everybody called them Americans, of course. They couldn't bear to think it was African. It was so good, and they'd always, had that sort of attitude. So it was good. We used to have to say about the Manhattan Brothers when they were launched, that they were kings of harmony from South Africa, and they sang in Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, so they would know they were African. Places like the Palladium always starred black American artists, So for the Manhattans to qualify to appear there, or to be asked to appear there, was really a victory for music and for Africa. I mean, I was always involved, as I say, with the Third World. Africa was certainly, we called it the Third World, but it was like the Fourth World. We never knew about South Africa. It was a hidden world out of which came all this.
siyajabula, siyahleka, siyadlala, siyathokoza. When hot drums are drumming, when horse strings are stringing. Aha, sonke siyathokoza. Kona lena Africa, a ping, a ping, a ping, a ping. Hockey dog is cookie and a ping, a ping, a ping, a ping. A ping, a ping, a ping, a ping. Skokian, siya jabula, siya togoza, siya shega, siya lala, siya togoza, siya shega, siya jabula, kone Africa. Skokian, siya lala, siya tula, siya shega, siya jabula, sonke siya jabula. A ping, a ping, a ping, a bingo. See ya, ha.
You know, at one time, Kippy and I were having a drink. For once, I was wearing a tie. This guy keeps on looking at me. We are having a drink. All of a sudden, he turns on me. He says, "Look, you've got a tie on. You know, with a tie on, you are a tycoon. And without a tie, you are a coon."
And so in Durban one day, I went along to interview the people from King of the Dark Chamber, which is a huge Indian musical from Bombay, which was touring there at the invitation of the Indian community, which is very big in Durban. And the person I met, first of all, was a star, a very beautiful Indian girl by the name of Surya Kumari, who was a film star in India. Anyway, she and I hit it off immediately, and we became very friendly. And we became inseparable for her time in South Africa. One evening, we were invited by Adam Leslie to come and visit his new home, which he just completed, and which he was launching with a very big party. And Surya and I had noticed over the past 10 days or 2 weeks or so that wherever we went after the show, if it were to a little cafe or to a nightclub or wherever to have dinner, there would always be the same little guy hanging around, a chap with red hair, who was very friendly but an inconsequential sort of person. And he didn't intrude upon our awareness very much. But that night he was there at that party too, and I remember saying to her, he gets invited everywhere, this guy, whoever he is. Anyway, it was a cold winter's night, and Adam had laid out all his wonderful food and lots of drinks next to his new swimming pool. And we were sitting there having a chat, and this little Sam, red-headed guy, fell in the pool, and we heard a loud scream, and we got splashed by the water. It was quite close to us. And we heard him say, "I can't swim, I can't swim." So Surya, elegant as anything in her beautiful sari and jewels, went over and stretched out a delicate hand and pulled him in, at which point I grabbed him and got him out. And he was frozen, and Surya dashed off and got a big towel. We took his shirt off and dried him and everything. And while he was sitting there looking up at us, his face crumpled almost into awful remorse. And he said, "I have to tell you, I'm a police informer." He said, "I've been following you for 3 weeks. I report on everything the two of you do." So I said, "Oh, isn't that fascinating?" And I popped him back in the pool.
And life goes on. Reflections of the past which make sense of the present and future. Stories which contribute to a greater human understanding of the ironies of life.
Looking back over my life, I can see where I cause you strife. But I know, oh yes, I know, I'll never make that same mistake again. Looking back over my deeds, I can see why